Well, it's been fantastic this past month getting your stories about Christmas. If you haven't had a chance to do so yet, a lot of the stories are posted online, and we'd encourage you have a read. There's just such amazing stories around Christmas. We have such amazing experiences around Christmas, and even as I said, I sort of have to stop myself and say, and there's some difficult stories around Christmas as well. But some really tough stuff can happen, but the stories are online. I'd encourage you to read them, and how different people in our community have experienced Christmas. Now, my family has probably collectively a favorite Christmas story, and that story revolves around an event that happened sometime before Christmas one year when our kids were quite young. Sandy had taken the kids to what we call Birds Hill Park in the Winnipeg area, and it was kind of a hobby farm. And our son, then about 9 years old, he ran after, he got a hold of a cat, and he sat down, and Sandy said it was like a miracle occurred. Because as our son is holding this cat in his arms, he became still. And that never happened. Sandy's just like, the only time I ever see this kid still is when he's sleeping. He's either sleeping or he's going 100 miles a minute. But our son held the cat on his lap, and he immediately became still. And Sandy was just like, wow, this was an amazing thing. But, we're kind of more dog people than cat people. And so we just kind of put it all out of our mind, thought, well, that was a nice experience. But sometime later, Sandy's in our local Costco, and she happens to go, the big table with all the books, and she finds a book on cats, or she sees a book on cats there, and she starts reading about the certain breed of cat called a ragdoll cat. And ragdoll cats are described as having some dog-like qualities. And so the next time I'm in Costco, Sandy says, hey, Adam, come over here. I want to show you this. And I started reading about these ragdoll cats. And it was like, wow, if this is really true, if ragdoll cats do possess some dog-like qualities, maybe it's worth the risk, right? A cat, but a son who gets calm, who is still, who's not going 100 miles an hour every second of the day. And so we set out on this journey of seeking to find out more and to discover where we could find a ragdoll cat. And sure enough, in the city of Winnipeg at that time, there was a cat. It's called a cattery for ragdoll cats. And we phoned them up and they said, yeah, we got kittens. Come over, take a look. Came over, looked at the kittens, and we said, okay, we're going to take the risk. We're going to get one. And the only issue was that the kittens wouldn't be ready until Christmas. And this actually hatched a plan in Sandy and my mind, because we were a little bit concerned as parents that our kids had become somewhat cynical about Christmas and Santa. And we thought, well, that's too bad. I mean, they're only 7, 9, and 11. You wait until you're 20 or 30 before you become cynical like that, right? And so we thought, what if one of us could sneak out on Christmas Eve and get that kitten and sneak the kitten back into the house without our children knowing about it? And sure enough, that's what we did. Christmas Eve came, and I got the kids ready at the front door, by the front window, all bundled up and ready to go outside. It's Winnipeg, it's, December, it's cold. And Sandy went, hey, I gotta go out and do an errand. Went out and did the errand, got the kitten, came in the back door as I pushed the kids out the front door and into the car. And off we went to our Christmas Eve activities. Well, you can imagine Christmas Eve, right? By the time our kids get home, they're like over the top, excited. They run into the living room where there's the Christmas tree and the presents. And on the table where we had left milk and cookies for Santa, all that remained was an empty glass and crumbs, as well as a letter from Santa Claus with official North Pole stationery. And our kids read that letter, and the letter was Santa's apology for coming early and saying to our kids, hey kids, I'm sorry, but I had a present for you that just wouldn't wait. I want you to seek through the whole house and find that present. Well, wouldn't you know, our kids were off like a flash, turning our house upside down as they were seeking to find what Santa left to them. And they finally came to our bedroom door. And there at our bedroom, they waited. And they put their hands on the knob of the door. They opened the door. And there was our little Christmas Eve, our Christmas kitten by the name of Jack Frost. And just to kind of round the story out for you, just to finish the story off, our kids kind of grew up with Jack Frost, the ragdoll cat, and he was a wonderful cat. You know, if you've got a child that you would like to see become still once in a while, then I encourage you. It was a good experience. I'm not sure how dog-like they are, but Jack definitely made us a believer in cats, like dog people and cat people now. And the reason I tell you that story this morning, I share that story with you, our favorite Christmas story as a family, is because Christmas is essentially all about seeking. See, once our kids had locked into this gift that Santa said was somewhere in the house, there was nothing that could hold them back through turning the place upside down to find what Santa had left them. But really, the whole event of seeking had happened much earlier, because Sandy and I thought, hey, maybe we have got a solution for our son who won't ever sit still. And so we began seeking after all of the information that we could find to see if this cat would really solve our child's energy problems. You know, it's like a cat that makes our son calm. Like, we'll take two. Maybe we'll take a whole litter of them. Well, that's getting a little carried away. But I have to confess, and maybe you can feel this way at times as well, I have to confess that I'm probably not so much of a hardcore seeker today. You see, I am so overwhelmed with information every day. I'm not sure how much space there is in my life for seeking after everything. And maybe you feel that way at times as well. You know, for instance, in my experience, you know, I get an email every day from Inc.com. And the subject line on that, the header on that email, it says, you know, today's must reads. How in the world do you resist that, right? Today's must reads. And they are full of great information. So maybe you could describe me much better as a cynic than a seeker, which is kind of tragic, because I have to wonder if maybe we are losing, or we have lost, what I like to call the fine art of seeking. And in losing the fine art of seeking, in failing to recognize how important seeking is in our lives, we miss out on the life-impacting, and I would even say this morning, eternity-altering discoveries that we can make. And so this morning, as we think about the fine art of seeking, the importance of seeking, I would like you to consider with me one of the greatest stories of Christmas. In Matthew's Gospel, now a Gospel is really a biography about Jesus. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as they write their Gospels, are really introducing us to who Jesus is, what Jesus said, what Jesus did. And so Matthew, in chapter 2, gives us this introduction into the birth of Jesus. And this is what he says. Just listen to these words. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born, the King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Now, in some respects, maybe many respects, this is fascinating. Because on one level, it's hard not to wonder, it's hard not to ask the question, why were these wise men even included into the Christmas story? Now, when it comes to these wise men, actually, a lot of what we believe from a cultural perspective is informed by probably inaccurate cartoons, like cartoon legend and historically inaccurate songs. Now, what I mean by that is that it doesn't matter how many times the Bare Naked Ladies and Sarah McLachlan sing, "We three kings have oriented our." We don't know if there were three kings. There could have been many kings. There were three gifts, but we don't know how many kings there actually was. And so there's kind of myth, there's kind of a legend around these wise men. What we do know is that they did travel from afar. Best as we can tell, they came from the land of the Medes and the Persians. And the reason why we say that is because this word magi is derived from Medes. And so we think they made this journey of what was probably something around 1,000 miles probably with a huge entourage, because these magi, these wise men, these astrologers, these royalty, these leaders, whoever these guys were, they were big stuff. They were important stuff. And so there was probably, as I said, this entourage that they traveled with. Now, one of the biggest inaccuracies that we have, one of the biggest legends there is around these wise men, is that they were there for the manger scene, right? I mean, everybody's nativity, you see a nativity, it's got the wise men there bowing down, offering their gifts to Jesus. But you notice even Matthew says after Jesus was born, and this isn't while, in the aftermath of Jesus being born, Mary giving birth to Jesus and Mary nursing Jesus. This is like after Jesus was born. And the reason we make a big deal about this is that we can see through then the king of Judea, a guy by the name of King Herod, through his murderous rage, kills, Matthew says, all of the boys, orders the execution of all of the boy babies 2 years old and under in Bethlehem. And so that gives us a bit of a ballpark to go, Jesus was probably somewhere around 2 years old, at least, somewhere between 1 year and 2 years at the time that these magi actually appeared on the scene. But what is so important, what we need to see through the example, through the seeking of the wise men, is around this whole issue of seeking is to ask the question, why? We see the importance of seeking through the question, why? Why did these wise men care? Why did they ask, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. And you just think about that for a moment. It's like, what? Like, why? Why would these magi from Persia come to Jerusalem following a star and ask about the one who has been born, the King of the Jews? Why would they care? And really, another important question is, where did they get their intel from? Like, where did the information that set them out on this perilous 1,000-mile journey come from? And the best that we can tell is that the information came from hundreds of years earlier through a man by the name of Daniel, who along with thousands of others would have been carried into exile from Jerusalem, from Judea, from Israel to the land of Babylon. And Daniel, you can read about Daniel in the Old Testament. In the book of Daniel, he has a fascinating story. But Daniel had this amazing, almost beyond description relationship with God. That God revealed things to Daniel about the history of the world, about the unfolding of events that in many respects is unprecedented. And on top of that, God gave Daniel this incredible insight, this incredible wisdom, this incredible ability to interpret the dreams of kings. And so here's the picture that emerges around these seeking wise men, this group of people who year after year, decade after decade, literally century after century, are passing on this information, who see this information that's been passed on that comes from Daniel as being highly significant. And they are watching to see how all of this is going to come together. They're watching for the signs. They're anticipating. They're waiting for the events. They're seeking, continually seeking, generation after generation for this event to occur. And you put on top of that, because astronomy is such a precise, refined science in our day, we know today that there is such predictability around orbits and all that starry and planetary stuff, so that there was this great alignment of planets, we know this, that happened around the birth of Jesus. And this is kind of fascinating. Some of you may want to kind of search this out, but you can actually go on Google and just, search for Star of Bethlehem. And And there's all kind of weird and wacky stuff on there, but there is some incredible research and scholarship that's been done that helps us understand that there was some amazing stuff going on in the heavens around the birth of Jesus. But here is the point. The fine art of seeking was serious business, was life-changing, eternity-altering business. These magi had information they believed was important, was vital, and they guarded it and passed it down and sought to discover if it was true. It was the pursuit of a lifetime and lifetimes. And this is what is so important when it comes to the fine art of seeking, why seeking is so vital for our lives. See, Matthew tells us, just look at this, verse 11. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and they worshipped him. And then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. Just picture that for a moment. Here you have this royalty, these elite men, these magi who have traveled afar, and what happens? Their seeking leads them to this life-impacting, even eternity-altering discovery. They, on one hand, give up the best that they have, at least things that represent the best, the greatest riches that they have are represented in these three things, this gold, this frankincense, and myrrh. They offer up the best that they have. But in doing so, they experience the treasure of Jesus. Grown men, respected men, they fall on their knees before this young child, and we read, they worshipped him. They worshipped him. You just picture this, these kings. And they're on their faces before Jesus, giving the best that they have before this young child, before this toddler. And they worshipped him, we read. And that word, worshipped, it tells us everything. But at the same time, we have to recognize to many of us, it's either meaningless or it's ordinary. Meaningless because, we say in our culture today, worshipped, right? And people are like, what are you talking about? Like, what does that even mean, worshipped? Who worships? Like, formally, who worships anything? Maybe that's what, you guys do in your church or your synagogue or your temple or whatever, but it's just not. There's just not this common understanding of what is the value of what does worship even mean. And I would even go a step further and say for those of us that go, well, yeah, but I'm a follower of Jesus, that so often this whole idea of worship, it can just easily slide into singing a few songs. I worshiped, my favorite band, Rand Collective or Ghost Ship or Citizens and Saints, whoever your favorite band is, it just kind of slides in to that kind of understanding or listening to your favorite radio station. But that's not what's happening here. You see this? They're down on their faces. They're handing over, they're offering up their riches to a little boy. That something about Jesus led these men to offer him everything. Everything that they had and everything that they were. And it's fascinating, really, that Jesus talks about this very kind of exchange, this very kind of transfer, this transformation that happens, that can happen in a person's life. In a sense, Jesus talks about this experience that can be the result of genuine seeking. And Jesus says this, he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that a man discovered hidden in a field. Now, when Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven, he's talking specifically about the experience of life that you and I can have in and through Jesus. That this baby who came into this world, God himself, and dwelt among us, lived among us, and gave his life for us, that in him and through him we can experience the quality of life that Jesus describes as the kingdom of heaven. Not just an experience of life that will happen one day, in heaven, but an experience of life that we can enter into through Jesus in relationship with Jesus today. And so talking about this kind of life, God's kind of life, if you will, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that a man discovered hidden in a field. And in his excitement, he hid it again and sold everything he owned to get enough money to buy the field. Again, Jesus goes on, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant on the lookout for choice pearls. When he discovered a pearl of great value, he sold everything that he owned and bought it. So what is Jesus saying to us? When you seek and you find the real treasure, the true treasure, the treasure of all treasures, then you gladly and you wisely give up everything else. That when you find the real treasure, the incomparable treasure, the value of everything else changes. The value of everything else takes on perspective, takes on its proper place in relationship to the greatest of treasures, the treasure of Jesus. Now the fact is, in spite of what I said about seeking earlier on and how, maybe I'm not such a hardcore seeker after all, when it comes right down to it, all of us are seekers. And we all have examples in our lives of what we seek after in the hope that this thing, for sometimes, some of us, sometimes this thing might be this person, this object, this job, this relationship, whatever it is, this experience, that somehow this thing is going to bring meaning into our lives. It's going to fulfill our lives. It's going to satisfy our seeking, because it seems like there's just something about who we are that it's like seeking is hardwired into us. And we look out on this world that we're in and all the things that are a part of it, and we think to ourselves, there's that. And I'm going to seek after that because I believe that in seeking after that it's going to make a difference in my life. It's going to provide a sense of fulfillment, a sense of satisfaction. And so we really do live lives, even in the midst of how overwhelmed we feel with information, we really do live lives where we seek after so many different things. But the original seekers, if I can call them that, the original seekers of Christmas, these wise men show us that the fine art of seeking, the significance of seeking, the importance of seeking is that seeking, our seeking, is ultimately and fully satisfied in the person of Jesus Christ. That in seeking and finding Jesus, on one hand, you give up your treasure. You offer up all those other things in your life that you have grabbed the hold of, thinking that these things are really going to satisfy me, really going to fulfill me, really going to give me the sense of self-worth or belonging or whatever it is that we're searching for, that we offer up our treasure because we have discovered that Jesus is the ultimate treasure. You've discovered the treasure that you've been longing for your entire life, and it's found in Jesus. He becomes your greatest treasure. He becomes your ultimate reward, your richest treasure. Everything else pales in comparison. Everything else takes on its proper place. He is the treasure. Jesus is the treasure that puts all other treasure into perspective. Now I get how that seems incredibly risky. And you're listening this morning and you're thinking to yourself, seriously? You're asking me to give up everything for Jesus? How do I know that I can trust him? How do I know that this offer that he makes is really true, is really going to satisfy, that deep seeking that's just a part of my heart and a part of my life? Well, one of the ancient songs that the early church began singing soon after Jesus' resurrection, it goes like this, and I want you to think about this with me, because in Philippians chapter 2, beginning in verse 6, if you want to look it up later, we read, "Though Jesus was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges." You know, the sense behind this is that he emptied himself. You know, he just poured it out. He gave up. He emptied himself of his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave. Of a slave. We don't like slavery in our day, but slavery in Jesus' day could just be a horrible, horrible thing. You were just like some goods to be used in a lot of cases. There were different levels of slavery, but in many ways, slavery was just like something. A slave was just like something somebody owned. So he took up the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God, and he died a criminal's death on the cross. You just think about that for a moment. Like, why would God do that? You know, if there's a God in heaven, if you're saying this morning, if there's a God in heaven, you know, some of us are saying since there's a God in heaven, but you might say this morning, if there's a God, why would he do that? And you just think of the picture that this early song of the church gives to us. Like, here you have God with all of the treasure, all of the wealth, all of the riches. And Jesus, God the Son, he empties, he gives all of that up. Why? Why would he do that? Because Jesus made you his treasure. Because Jesus gave up the treasure of heaven to assure you that you are now his treasure. That Christmas is all about the reality, all about the statement, all about the understanding, all about the experience that Jesus gave up everything so that you could know that he treasures you. That's why I believe that the wise men are an integral part, an important, vital part of the Christmas story. They tell us, they show us that Christmas is all about seeking. In seeking and finding Jesus, you find everything. So let me ask you, how do you experience Christmas? How will you experience Christmas as everything that it's meant to be? I would even say everything that in your heart you long for it to be. And just as an aside, I would say one of the reasons we can experience so much disappointment at Christmas is because there's all these things that we associate Christmas with, and they don't satisfy us, and we long for more. So let me ask you the question, how do you experience Christmas as everything that it's meant to be? You recognize that Christmas is all about Jesus making you his treasure. And in knowing that, he leaves me with the question, won't you recognize him? Won't you accept him? Won't you embrace him? Won't you invite him to be your greatest treasure?